is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello, welcome to The World Today, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen. Our top stories. The United States says it has killed 2 high-profile Islamic State targets in retaliation for the bombing at Kabul airport, which claimed the lives of 170 people. The coronavirus pandemic, United States intelligence says it's unable to determine the origins of COVID-19. And the last word, why one of the biggest private tutors of English language is on the verge of collapse. The United States has carried out a drone strike against Islamist forces in Afghanistan after Thursday's suicide bombing at Kabul airport. 2 high-profile members of the militant group ISIS-K are believed to have been killed in the attack in the east of the country. Meanwhile, as Allied troops end their operations, Afghans trying to leave with them are making their final efforts to flee life under Taliban rule. Louise Greenwood reports.
British troops landing back on the tarmac in southern England. With just hours to go until the UK withdraws from Afghanistan, the UK government has admitted that some of those eligible to leave with them will almost certainly be left behind.
I think we've done an extraordinary job to evacuate as many as we have, but I'm afraid it's absolutely heartbreaking that we can't bring everybody out. And I think that point's been made very strongly, certainly by the Defence Secretary and others over the last 10 days or so.
With dozens of Afghans still critically injured after Thursday's suicide bombing at Kabul airport, American forces launched a drone strike in the Nangarhar province close to the Pakistan border on Friday night. The US military says it believes the strike killed a planner for the ISIS-K militant group, which has claimed responsibility for the airport explosion. With the Allied operation entering its final hours, the US says the risk remains at a critical level, with more attacks likely.
It's ongoing and it is active. Our troops are still in danger. That continues to be the case every day that they are there. This is the most dangerous part of the mission.
The US says evacuations will continue at what it's called a very fast pace up until Tuesday's deadline. But with roads around the airport either closed or manned by Taliban checkpoints, attention is shifting to evacuating those eligible through processing centres in second countries, such as Turkey and Qatar.
The crucial thing is that the Taliban authorities, the new government, however it's composed, have got to understand that if they want to have engagement with the West, if they want to have a relationship with us, then safe passage for those is absolutely paramount.
The British Prime Minister also added that talks are underway between the UK and Germany over aid to Afghanistan and a possible roadmap for dealing with any future Taliban government. Those with no route out are left in the country facing multiple challenges, as well as rule from a group deemed a terrorist organisation by almost all international governments. Afghanistan is facing water shortages, food insecurity and a collapsing economy, with the United Nations warning that up to 500,000 people could attempt to flee in the coming months. The worst of the Afghan crisis may be yet to come. Louise Greenwood, CGTN.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent in Kabul, Zamirullah Abasan. Zamirullah, America strikes back. The last planes leaving Afghanistan and hundreds of people who wanted to fly out seemingly will now be left behind.
Hello, Jimmy. Yes, this is the case. Now, the U.S. only stand on evacuation process is already on the verge of ending up this process. While thousands of people are awaited and there were crowds even at the last moments and the days left. But at the same time that we see these problems and it's already seem be finalized, the Taliban political office leadership member Sher Abbas Tanigzi has told that the people can travel freely after the airport of Kabul is normalized and commercial flight would be on the ground, and then the Afghanistan Civil Aviation Authority will be responsible for all the flights, and then those who want to flee the country can go freely without any problem from the system, according to Abbas Tanikzai. He also added that those who have documents, passports and everything necessary will not be disturbed, and they can go freely as normal individual, and the system will be normalized. But there are concerns about the system, if it will be normalized or not. This comes in a situation that many wanted to flee the country, not only because of the fear of Taliban, because the prices are in its highest level, and also shortage of food and medicine and everything is on the stage, while banks and the biggest exchange market is also closed, and that's of much more concern about future of Afghanistan, and people are already threatened.
Zamiralai Abbasin in Kabul, thank you very much. Well, Germany has flown its last evacuation mission from Afghanistan, with both troops and civilians arriving back in Europe. The German military has brought more than 5,000 people out of Kabul in the last 11 days as they seek new lives abroad. Ryan Thompson reports.
We're here at Ramstein Air Base in western Germany. It is ground zero for the U.S. resettlement efforts from Afghanistan. It is where they are processing and treating people before they head off to the United States. It is a massive effort. In just 8 days, they've taken in 20,000 people. 5,000 of them have been sent off back to the United States. They tell us it's a rapidly quick effort. They are getting people here, processing them in just about 96 hours, going through medical treatments, taking their biometrics, making sure their documents are ordered, and then they are eventually sending them off to the United States for a proper resettlement scheme where they will be able to begin a new life. Some of them are SIVs that worked alongside U.S. forces in the U.S. military. Others are just refugees who were lucky enough to get on the plane at the Kabul airport. We spoke to some medical doctors who gave us an update about how this process is going.
We are seeing some stress reactions, I would say, but generally speaking, people have been doing very well, very resilient. But there are some people with mild anxiety. We're also seeing exacerbations of chronic disease, and that's for mental health and physical health. So people who don't have access to medicines, who are having issues with that when they come off their medicines, we're doing everything we can to try to assist with that, to bridge a gap, to get them stable, and we've had to do that on a few occasions. We have very rarely transported patients to LARMC for those issues, and so far none have required admission.
You can see just behind me about a couple hundred Afghan refugees have loaded this U.S.-operated flight. They will head to the United States where they will be able to begin a safer life away from the Taliban rule. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Ramstein.
Now the rest of the day's news, and United States intelligence agencies have failed to determine the origins of COVID-19. In a report commissioned by President Biden, intelligence agencies were split over whether the virus developed naturally or leaked from a laboratory. But they did agree that it was not developed as a biological weapon. Let's talk to our correspondent Nick Harper in Washington. Nick, tell us more about this report.
Well, this is a report, Jamie, that President Biden asked his intelligence agencies 3 months ago to put together, really a deep dive to try and find out the potential origins to the COVID-19 virus. However, the intelligence communities, 18 of them in total, really didn't come to any conclusive agreements. They came up with two potential theories: that COVID-19 had either come about as natural exposure from an animal that had been infected with COVID-19 and then passed it to humans. Some agencies said they had low confidence in that outcome. The second possible theory was that there was a laboratory incident. Some of the US agencies said that they had a moderate confidence in that. But as you mentioned, one definite finding from that result was that it was not developed as a biological weapon, and the US also said that China did not know about it before the initial outbreak. Jamie?
What's been the reaction from China and within the United States?
Well, Joe Biden has said that he wants more information, that he will continue to press China to try and get more analysis, more findings from the Chinese. He said in a statement, the world deserves answers and we will not rest until we get them. The bottom line really in the report was more information was needed. China, however, has reacted angrily to the report when it was initially proposed and the findings as well. Let's listen to what the Vice Foreign Minister had to say.
The so-called report is entirely politically driven and false. There is no science or credibility. The U.S. has also released a statement to smear and attack China. Beijing has expressed its strong objection to that and launched a protest to the U.S.
Well, those findings are still being pored over, but the international community quite simply demanding more answers to try and work out what the origins were to the COVID-19 outbreak.
Nick Harper in Washington, thank you very much. Well, many scientists expect further investigations will be needed if we're to understand the source of the COVID-19 virus. Our correspondent Yolo Abdavid reports.
Since a World Health Organization team of scientists spent 28 days in Hubei province in January-February this year, its findings have become politicized. The US intelligence report is inconclusive as to exactly how COVID-19 developed, but leans towards the theory that it originated from an infected animal. But it does conclude the virus wasn't developed as a biological weapon.
I will always say, no matter what the subject is, that people's opinions are no substitute for hard evidence. And that evidence I am completely unaware of. I'm pretty confident in telling you that it doesn't exist. If it does exist, they need to make with it and show us.
Since the WHO visit, the World Health Organization, China and the US have been entangled in arguments surrounding how the virus developed and transferred to the human population. It was first detected in Wuhan sometime in November or December 2019. According to the WHO's report, the most likely scenario is that the virus jumped from bats to another animal and then infected humans. Many scientists are asking for better cooperation.
One of the differences between the first and the second SARS epidemics, in other words, the one in 2002 and the one now, is that in Wuhan, there is a lab that has been investigating bat coronaviruses. That was not present, as I understand it, anywhere in the Guangdong province in 2002. So we know that there was a lab that was doing these things. We also know that lab leaks can occur.
As mass testing has helped medical experts and scientists to track and trace COVID-19, further work is needed if we are to understand how this pandemic has spread so widely and killed 4.5 million people so far.
We should endeavour to find out where and how it got into the human population, but we have to be clear that if it passed through other humans after it made the jump from animals to humans, it may have done so, may have passaged through humans asymptomatically before it got to the first people it caused disease in.
This report came from an office that draws information from the US's 18 spy agencies and was divided on the origins of the virus. China's foreign minister has dismissed it as anti-science, but the calls for further studies are likely to continue. Yolo Abdavid, CGTN, London.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead here on The World Today. Our planet has a new island off the coast of Greenland. We'll find out where it came from later in the show.
the EU's digital COVID certificate, which offers the promise of unlocking hassle-free travel around Europe this summer.
In less than 2 weeks' time, the Czech border will also open to all EU and Serbian citizens. 4.4 million Hungarians received their first dose of COVID vaccine.
18 and over can receive a COVID-19 vaccination, but it does come with conditions.
Third wave will probably take longer to emerge. This vaccination centre is part of a massive effort to try and drive down the numbers of the new variant that was first identified in India.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. The United States says it has killed 2 high-profile Islamic State targets in retaliation for the bombing at Kabul airport, which claimed the lives of 170 people. Our other headlines: the coronavirus pandemic. United States intelligence says it's unable to determine the origins of COVID-19. The French president says he'll keep troops in Iraq as part of anti-terrorism operations for as long as the Iraqi government needs, whether the United States decides to withdraw or not. Emmanuel Macron made his pledge in Baghdad after a summit attended by the heads of state from Egypt, Jordan and Qatar. During his visit to Iraq, he also met French special forces involved in the fight against Islamic State militants.
We all know that we shouldn't drop our guard because Daesh remains a threat, and I know the fight against those terrorist groups is a priority. I want to renew the commitment of France to be on your side within the coalition. I also think about the population of Iraq and the hope of a better life, to turn the page of Daesh, and on that point the displaced clearly have the right to a secure and dignified return to their regions of origin. I want to tell you that France encourages and is alongside the Iraqi government to pursue those efforts in order to support the displaced from different communities.
Gaza's only gateway to the outside world remains closed. Egypt shut the Rafah crossing on Monday after an escalation of hostilities between Israel and Hamas. From Gaza, Noor Harazin reports.
Thousands of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are waiting for their chance to travel. But the sudden closure of the Rafah crossing is disturbing their plans. 19-year-old Iyad Abu Safiya has received a scholarship to study medicine in Germany. He was preparing to leave this week, but now his future remains uncertain.
The closure of the Rafah crossing affected me as a student and affected thousands of other students here in Gaza who wish to study abroad. It's also affected patients. We can no longer travel abroad to study and continue our education. My family and I fear that tensions will increase and a new war will occur again, and then we as the civilians will suffer greatly.
Last Saturday, Israelis and Hamas exchanged fire across their border, killing one Israeli soldier and injuring dozens of Palestinians.
Through closing the crossing, the Egyptians wanted to put pressure and make the Palestinian factions feel they must abide by what is agreed upon through the Egyptian mediation to achieve progress in calming the situation in the Gaza Strip and resolving the basic issues with Israel.
Palestinian activists on social media attacked the Egyptian authorities after their decision to close the border.
Closing the Rafah crossing makes the humanitarian situation in Gaza worse because it is Gaza's only border. This is against the human rights to live and move freely, especially for those who need medical treatment outside Gaza and students as well. Many of them could lose their visas.
The Rafah crossing is considered Gaza's main gate to the outside world. Noor Harazin, CGTN, Gaza.
People are twice as likely to need hospital care with the Delta variant of COVID rather than the Alpha form of the virus. That's according to a UK study looking at more than 43,000 COVID infections between March and May, when both Alpha and Delta variants were circulating. The bulk of these cases involved people who had not yet been vaccinated. In Australia, emergency services in New South Wales say they're struggling to meet demand from COVID patients. The country reported a daily record of 1,126 locally transmitted cases on Saturday. Australia's outbreak of the Delta variant began in June. More than half of Australians are currently in lockdown. 90 schoolchildren abducted 3 months ago in Nigeria have been reunited with their families following their release by gunmen. Some of the pupils were as young as 5 years old, and one died in captivity. Armed men attacked the Islamic school in Niger State in late May, taking the students. It is not yet known if a government ransom was paid. The U.S. Gulf Coast is bracing itself for Hurricane Ida after it caused widespread damage in Cuba. Ida, which has been upgraded from a tropical storm to a hurricane, could pack winds of up to 225 kilometers per hour when it makes landfall on Sunday. Forecasters warn that heavy downpours and a tidal surge could plunge most of the Louisiana shoreline underwater. One of the biggest English tutoring companies in China is on the verge of collapse. Already hammered by the pandemic, Wall Street English was recently fined for misleading advertising as China tightens its regulation of the private tutoring sector. It's raised questions about the future of this industry. CGTN's Huang Fei reports.
Fever, yeah. These doctors are discussing the symptoms of COVID-19, not because they're brushing up on medical knowledge. They're here to practice English. For the past 4 months, they've been taking weekly lessons as part of preparations for future overseas exchanges.
As practitioners of Western medicine, we need to keep learning from the West, not just professionally, but culturally as well. I read a lot of medicine journals in English, but I struggle with conversations. Increasingly, we will have patients from foreign countries, and improving our spoken English will help us serve them better.
Students had to take a break from their studies in May and June, as Guangzhou suffered a new wave of local coronavirus infections. David Klink, who founded the school 14 years ago, says bringing business back in after a COVID-induced hiatus has been an uphill battle.
We got shut down for 38 days. We were not allowed to open at all. So that obviously affected business in a massive, massive way. We paid our staff as much as we could afford to pay our staff. We had to pay full rent. As a business person, there was no, help. Actually, I'm just lucky. I feel lucky that we're still around.
It's a far cry from the golden days of the early 2000s. Learning English was all the rage when China first joined the WTO and multinationals arrived in droves. Foreign tutoring companies like Wall Street English cashed in on the craze. But experts say the firm had become less competitive over the years in attracting investments for its adult-focused business. It was also slapped with hefty fines over advertisement fraud in June. Insiders say regulatory crackdowns on after-school tutoring were the last straw.
In the past, you couldn't walk down this road without being stalked by people selling English lessons to you. Wall Street English is especially known for its aggressive advertising in China. But in recent weeks, it's the company's financial troubles dominating headlines. Many employees say they haven't been paid in months, and students, many who took out huge loans to pay for lessons, are now demanding refunds.
Still, English lessons for adults is a multi-billion-dollar industry in China, driven partly by the increase in graduate school applicants. There's also a demand within the business world.
We're moving towards a phase where the top echelons of the management team isn't someone that's an expatriate that's flown in and running a team. What I'm seeing is lots of multinationals here are growing, and the middle layer management, which are predominantly Chinese, are moving up. So I think there's a demand from them internally to say, hey, we need to upskill ourselves, our capabilities in language.
Beijing's sweeping reforms in the after-school tutoring sector is expected to force some institutions to pivot towards adults as well.
Let's keep going. We got some more.
For David, this could mean stiff competition in the years ahead. But between a classroom full of doctors and other eager students from across the country and more than a few million views on his Douyin feed, business is stable for now. Huang Fei, CGTN, Guangzhou.
Rome's landscape could change dramatically in the next 3 years as the city's famous pine trees are attacked by a damaging parasite. Many of the Eternal City's century-old pine trees have already been cut down. Hermione Kitson reports.
Rome's majestic pine trees are a symbol of the city, treasured like its ancient monuments, and now they're under serious threat from a plague of parasites.
I think it is a really serious problem. The consequences that we are seeing are so rapid that when we realise the gravity of the situation, it will be too late.
The insect is called pine tortoise scale. It sucks the sap of the tree relentlessly and secretes a sticky mold that blocks photosynthesis. An infested tree usually dies within 3 years.
And this is the final phase of the process, complete desiccation of the tree, and it has to be cut down.
It's a race against time to preserve the city's panorama and history. Some stone pines are up to 150 years old and 40 metres tall.
The landscape will change. This is the concrete risk because the trees with advanced damage are destined to die.
Desert. It will be like a desert. Here it is cool because there is the pine forest. Imagine if it was gone, how hot it would be.
The insects originated in North America. It's believed they arrived in Italy via imported plants from the Bahamas.
The problem is that in Italy there is no predator to help combat the parasite.
All hopes are riding on a recently approved pesticide treatment.
Endotherapy is a type of drip. You make a hole every 30 centimetres in the base of the tree and you insert the insecticide with a syringe.
But the invasive treatment isn't a long-term answer. Researchers are trying to find a biological solution, such as predatory parasites.
The parasite arrived in Rome 3 years ago, and in that time it spread to 80% of the city's pine trees. The government has pledged $500,000 to tackle the problem, but experts say much more is needed.
We have to move quickly, politically and legislatively, to mobilise as much money as possible because this is an investment for the future.
In the meantime, new pines are being planted to help preserve the scenery for generations to come. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Rome.
Scientists have discovered a new island off the coast of Greenland, which they say is the world's most northern point of land. The tiny island is roughly 30 metres across. It consists of seabed mud and moraine, which is soil and rock left behind by moving glaciers. The explorers say the land was exposed by shifting pack ice, but that its appearance was not a direct consequence of global warming. The headlines again. The United States says it has killed 2 high-profile ISIS-K targets during a drone strike in Afghanistan. The strike against the militant group came in response to Thursday's suicide bombing at Kabul airport, which killed 170 people. And the coronavirus pandemic. United States intelligence says it's unable to determine the origins of COVID-19 in a report commissioned by President Joe Biden. Intelligence agencies were split over whether the virus developed naturally or leaked from a laboratory. And that's it for The World Today. Thank you for watching. Coming up next on CGTN, Stephen Cole with the agenda. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.